Of ourselves.
Yes, I'm Joseph Mullen.
And I'm Kim Ives.
This is This Week in Haiti from Haiti Liberté, and welcome back for, I think, a very important discussion considering the timing of things. Usually, when we do our lives, uh, we're talking either some historical context will come into play, and it's contemporary, but also the characters that we're looking at, like an Eric Prince, have some historical background that we look at. But I think this is the first time that we have kind of a, not an election, obviously, but we have kind of
Transition.
a transition, yeah, a deadline, a timeline of something happening, um, where it's kind of, this episode is themed around something that's upcoming and in the near future. So today's the 1st of February, and next Saturday, a week from yesterday, there will be ostensibly a transition of power. Supposedly, the nine members of well, I guess all of them will resign, and supposedly the prime minister as well.
Well, yeah, that's the way it was expected to be, that the Transitional Presidential Council, with the prime minister, de facto prime minister that they put in place, Alix Didier Fils-Aimé, would all be out of a job. And I should say also the de facto Transitional Presidential Council presidents, 7 of them again were voting members. 6 of those voting members were political parties or political coalitions. One was the representative of the bourgeoisie of Haiti. He is the current president. And 2 of the counselors were simply ornamental figures who represented religious groups and civil society and so forth. But there is a great deal of unclarity, uncertainty about what will happen. Will the current president stay on? That's one of the questions. He has closely allied himself with Alix Didier Fils-Aimé, who has the full, strong backing of the US, the European Union, the OAS, and all the neo-colonial masters of Haiti. That would be Canada, France, and the US. And so it looks like that the calls for all of them to step down and for a new government to be reestablished with, as the Constitution dictates, representatives of the Supreme Court of Haiti. It looks like that's not going to happen. The U.S. wants to keep a strong, proven guy in place, and that is Alix Didier Fils-Aimé, whose, I could say, principal credentials, most likely, are the fact that he hired Eric Prince of Blackwater fame or infamy, whose new outfit, Soldier of Fortune outfit, is called Vectis Global. And at the core of it are some 200 Salvadoran mercenaries who have been overheard as they carried out massacres, which we have been documenting in Haiti Liberté, in Haiti's poor neighborhoods, slums, ghettos, as they're called in Haiti. They call them ghettos. And since December 30th, by our count, or by the accounts that we've received, some 100 people have been killed in cold blood in massacres by death squads, basically, of police and mercenaries, and also by drone attacks. So this is the moment that we're waiting to see what will happen on February 7th. And there is the possibility, we should just, to give a little details, to go into the weeds a little bit, there was an effort by the Transitional Presidential Council to oust Didier Fils-Aimé beforehand. That is, in Haiti, formalities mean a great deal. That would be accomplished by them publishing in Le Moniteur, the official publication of the state, which makes various laws simply by the publication. They had a vote of 5 of its members. That's the majority needed. 5 of the 9 members need to vote to pass something, and 5 of them did. They got 5 people, even though one was a last-minute entry into the 5. And so even though they voted out the guy they hired, Fils-Aimé, he refused to have the press, that is Le Moniteur, publish the decree. And so he remains in power. And then when they were going to make another decree, which probably also would not have been accepted, to oust the president who was siding with him, that is Laurent Saint-Cyr, one of those 5 backed out, saying, "Oh, it's creating too much turmoil in our midst and we need to be unified." So either he was threatened or bought or both. And as a result, it looks like as of February 7th, we will see once again a prime minister who is, just for those who don't follow Haiti closely, the head of state, the head of government. He's not the head of state. The head of state is the president, and the head of government, that is the guy who appoints the various ministers and makes the country run, is the prime minister. So he will end up becoming a head of government without heads of state, or without a head of state, possibly. Or maybe they'll keep Saint-Cyr on as a figurehead. This is what they did in the 2004 to 2006 coup d'etat. You had a guy called Gérard Latourtou, who was the prime minister. He was the guy really running the show. And they had this sort of figurehead they would trot out for ceremonies every now and then, called Boniface Alexandre, who was the head of state. But he was, just there as a sort of a decoration. And we've seen this often in most of the coups, and this will be another coup, where it's the prime minister whose name is remembered in the history books, and the president is usually the one who is not really remembered. For instance, in the 91 to 94 coup, you had 2 cases of prime ministers with presidents. We remember the prime ministers, Jean-Jacques Honorat, Marc Bazin. We don't remember the presidents as well. They're not as well remembered, we should say. And the same thing happened in the coup against Aristide. Boniface Alexandre is not as remembered as Gérard Latourtou. Anyway, Didier Fils-Aimé is going on to become the latest example of president slash prime minister, or prime minister slash president, as was Ariel Henry, who succeeded him as the prime minister for 3 years, basically from July, I forget the date he came in, maybe the 21st or 22nd of 2001, until February 29th, 2004, when the coalition of armed groups in Port-au-Prince, called the Vivre Ensemble, the Live Together coalition, basically ran him out of town, or I should say, wouldn't let his plane return to Port-au-Prince. So he essentially was given the old heave ho, and that's where we got the current configuration.
Yeah, I thought that the notion of having the Supreme Court aspect, which I kind of just learned about recently, was part of the plan B, or kind of a solution on the table if what they want to happen doesn't pan out exactly. That they have the Supreme Court kind of as a backup. Um, that there could be, kind of the judiciary as these, reliable, you know, they have the credentials and the respect of civil society or whatever to basically come in and be the figureheads, because this is really more so about who is the figurehead for the U.S., who is the, uh, you know,
Strongman.
yeah, strongman to some extent is kind of what we're predicting to happen, or has kind of been playing out a little bit with, as you were talking about, the members of the CPT basically getting totally denied. And last week we talked about how they had, especially the more left wing elements of this group, had tried to have this kind of reformist solution, and then they tried to utilize it for what it was their intention to have, and it backfired because obviously they were just collaborating with the empire, and them then trying to get themselves out of the pit that they dug for themselves didn't go very well. Even I think that, and we've surely mentioned this a few times, but it's worth reiterating that Fritz Alphonse Jean, one of the members there, having faced these sanctions, and
He was the first one to be sanctioned.
right,
Yeah.
that's pretty remarkable. I don't think that even a couple of months ago or a year ago, when we were just kind of starting doing this program and kind of reading the papers and reporting on stuff, it seemed like the CPT was a very kind of I mean, it is. There's no denying that it is totally pliable, and they went along with their own demise in the end, right, as the case with reformists. But it was surprising that they had sanctioned, the U.S. had sanctioned different members such as Alphonse Jean. I don't know that if Kamala Harris is president of America right now, for example, that this situation would be very different. Or Biden, I guess, in an alternative universe, is still president. Right at the point that there's not really, that Trump is pursuing such a radically different policy, although having this one central figure that you can, instrumentalize, especially as they're making overt war in Haiti, but definitely as well against Venezuela and Cuba right now, that they need somebody to kind of just be the Cadillo for Haiti. And I don't think that we've talked so much about Didier Fils-Aimé, his background, his political affiliation. None of it really matters because he's again just the marionette there. But I'm curious about his own kind of
His own background. Well, it's interesting. I knew his father, who was Alix Fils-Aimé, fairly well, and he was at one point a prisoner in Fort Dimanche under Duvalier. He had been one of the founders of a thing called the League of Former Haitian Political Prisoners, or LAP, with another young radical of that period called Robert Duval. And not the Robert Duval of Hollywood fame, no. But Bobby Duval, as he's known in Haiti, was together with Alix Fils-Aimé, who became very close to a clique around former President René Préval. And these were all, I could say, children of the 60s. They'd been radicalized by the anti-imperialist struggles against the Vietnam War, against the wars in Africa. and were some sort of, I could say, enlightened bourgeoisie, bourgeoisie éclairée, as they're called in Haiti. They had some revolutionary inclinations. They admired Cuba. Fidel, of course, was a model, a symbol that they all looked up to, and it was they were in some ways um, doing a slow walk with the empire, who they came to work with, who they agreed to rule Haiti under an occupation with, who under whose occupation they agreed to rule Haiti, and yet they too, just like this crew now, were essentially kicked out. To make the story a little condensed and simplified, Rene Preval was trying to do a sort of a two-timing approach with the U.S., where he was dealing with Venezuela and Cuba. In particular, with Venezuela, it was under Rene Preval that the Petrocaribe program was brought in. And the U.S. was very angry about this and fought it tooth and nail with the big oil companies. And Haiti Liberté published, with the help of documents that WikiLeaks gave us, because we were the Haitian publication that WikiLeaks gave the 2,000 secret cables of the State Department from the Cablegate leak that Chelsea Manning helped make happen. Our first article was really on this Petrocaribe battle that happened. And so even though the ambassador at the time, a woman called Janet Sanderson, called Rene Preval Haiti's indispensable man, it turned out that he was very dispensable. After the earthquake of January 12th, 2010, he was essentially given an electoral coup d'etat, kind of a color revolution, in the elections of November 2010, where Michel Martelly, a devaluerist, very lewd, very ribald compa singer, was basically installed in power by Hillary Clinton. And Rene Preval was essentially told to withdraw his candidate, who had technically or apparently come in second in the initial election and would be in the runoff, to replace him with Michel Martelly. So this is just one more proof, if it was needed, that they use these figures, these puppets, or these people who are maybe sort of rebellious puppets, like a condom. And once they're used, they're thrown away and replaced with somebody else. So all of this goes back to Alix Didier Fils-Aimé's father, Alix Fils-Aimé, who is also cited in the WikiLeaks cables. And it's funny, I should probably go back to the documents, which we still have, and do a little profile of him. But he was much more radical. He would come to the congresses of the National Popular Assembly, which was in the National Popular Party, which were the Marxist expressions of popular power in Haiti in the 1980s and 90s and 2000s. He was very much in agreement with the revolutionary demands and outlook of that current leader at the time, Ben Dupuy. And so I think he brought to Alix Didier Fils-Aimé maybe some of that, shall we say, image, and he was seen as, he was one of the first guys under Preval who went to the slums of Port-au-Prince in that period of 2005 and 6. Excuse me, after 2006, and did some kind of negotiations with the armed groups there to have a disarmament, what they call the CNDDR. And both Joseph and I are suffering from a little bit of sniffles. So I think it was CNDDR was the name of it, but in any case, it was the outfit that would negotiate with the so-called gangs, and these were armed groups in the slums who'd been fighting against the foreign military interventions. So he was there essentially as a guy saying, listen, comrades, I understand, but right now we got the US there and they're coming in and they have their troops here, and we need to disarm. We can't be fighting with these weren't US troops precisely, they were UN troops that these gangs were fighting with, quote unquote gangs, again, armed groups were fighting, Haitian armed groups. And the UN in 2005 and 2006 carried out a number of terrible massacres in these shanty towns.
And lynchings too.
And lynchings as well. In Cape Haitian, there was one young man who was lynched. You can read about these in Haiti Liberté. And all of this is to say that his father, Alix, Fils-Aimé, as radical a game as he talked, but he ended up walking with imperialism and in some way facilitating their not only takeover but dismantling of Haiti. And so here comes Alix Didier Fils-Aimé, and I don't know how well he knew his father. I never knew of him before he came to power. And so he apparently had a bourgeois mother as well. And so maybe but he seems to be doing a much more, shall we say, zealous approach of shining the boots of the imperial master than his father did, who did it with a little bit of a sneer. And I did read in the WikiLeaks his interview with the ambassador at the time, Sanderson, and she was sort of amused at his remarks and was saying something like, he seems to have some distrust for us, but is nonetheless talking to us. So, but it was almost more amusement at him than any kind of anger or rejection.
Well, it's fascinating to hear that he was a prisoner at one point.
The father, yeah.
His father, yes.
Yeah.
And fighting against Duvalier. And I think that this kind of contingency plan that they have for, if outcome A doesn't occur, which is he stays on as prime minister, the rebellious elements of the CPT are sanctioned, imprisoned, whatever, the CPT is dissolved. I'm sure they would like to, keep maybe like Laurent Saint-Cyr as in his role, whatever that might be, but how can you do that without dissolving the CPT as constructed and then maybe just saying, oh, we'll just have a president, no rotating council? I don't know.
Well, I think, as you say, we're in the period of Trump where they do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They don't care about appearances,
I'm interested that they would float this idea. I was reading a bit from Catherine Charlemagne, who writes these articles, which people can see on the website, the one transition to another, which is really the great profile of kind of the inner workings. And unfortunately, I can't. There are all these proposals being floated, like last week we talked about the organ for the control of the transition, which is the kind of left proposal,
The Montana
the Montana
Accord
Accord,
proposal.
which the only left thing about it is that, you know, some of the groupings there have some
Have the word socialist in their name.
Yeah, there's nothing like intrinsically leftist, and really a lot of these proposals are not super dissimilar in terms of how they want to see, you know, power be basically shared with the empire. Even with the main one, which is just keep a strongman prime minister, it's just sharing or really just being told what to do. And I think it's very important, as you noted, that he is the guy who has the connection to Prince. The rest don't really have that, or it's whatever, it's ambiguous. Being sanctioned by the US might mean that you, but even just position yourself against the mercenary intervention force. But if they do really go heavy with Didier Fils-Aimé and his connection to Prince, it's very concerning because he is like been the one to really push for that, and that might mean they just, yeah, Trump goes full on with this mercenary stuff, which, you know, we can even show the pictures, or people can go look at the pictures. Maybe we can't show the pictures because
Yeah, we'll be immediately thrown off.
We monetize whatever, but, you know, censor really because of it being damning. But yeah, that's more of what we can expect if he, I think, really stays on and is the main guy and is given more overtly unilateral decision making.
Right, and it may be even stepped up. Marco Rubio gave a press conference this past week where he seemed not to rule out the possibility that there would be U.S. troops sent into Haiti to fight the gangs, the armed groups at this time. Now, it should be said that they are definitely carrying out a very, very energetic campaign to wipe out neighborhoods. Bel Air and Lower Delma, which is where Jimmy Cherizier, the charismatic leader of the armed groups, was based. Their neighborhoods, Lower Delma was his neighborhood, Delma 2, 4, and 6. Those are named for the roads that come off the Delma spine that goes up the mountain. So that neighborhood has practically been turned to rubble, much like Gaza. Same pictures. You wouldn't notice the difference. The buildings have just been bulldozed or blown up. That is now happening in Bel Air, but they are doing it in an even more horrendous way. And for Haitians who are watching this, I did a show last night. I believe it was on the 30th, excuse me, with Ralph Laurent, who has a program, Live Télé Tambou Vérité, which is a big YouTube channel. He has close to 40,000 followers on there, and has huge audiences. You can find the interview on our website, on the Haiti Liberté website. We reproduce them when we do shows with him. And this massacre there is, on the one hand, to wipe out a little bit like they used to do in Vietnam back in the 60s and early 70s, where they would wipe out a village, and then they would put, and this was actually pioneered in Haiti back when the U.S. Marines were fighting the Cacos from 1916, 17, 18, 19, 20. They would raise a village, and then they would set up what they call a strategic hamlet, which is basically where you put all the people in a guarded camp so they can't provide the fighters fighting the imperialist with food or whatever other forms of support. So basically, you divorce the armed groups from the popular base that they were functioning with or out of. And that's essentially what's going on the one hand. And two, downtown Port-au-Prince, they seem to have a notion to do, much as Trump plans to do with Gaza, to turn it into a new Riviera, to make a new beautiful paradise for the bourgeoisie, turn it into an amazing, showpiece of some sort. Sorry, no, I have to sneeze.
I think that on the one hand, you have this intensification of the combat that's going on. On the other hand, we're really kind of analyzing. I think we're doing this because a lot of the literature and the articles that have been published about this side, a lot of the coverage has been in French, especially the Captain Charlemagne articles. That we haven't kind of broken down, and also that it's coming up in a week, that you really get an appreciation when you read some of the articles in French, especially of the Machiavellian politicking that's going on. All the factions that are forming, all the different proposals that are being made, the betrayal or kind of the downfall of the CPT has been, like we said, especially interesting. But I think that this idea to have the plan B, which is to have the Supreme Court and the judiciary play more of an active role and basically become, the judiciary become the executive branch. It's very revealing of how desperate.
Yeah, and I doubt they will actually do that. I mean, not that they won't find judges or couldn't find judges who are completely pliant and opportunist and corrupt, but simply that they have a known one in hand is worth two in the bush, and so they know. And they maybe under Biden or Kamala Harris they would have done such a move, but Trump just does not give a flying fuck. So he is just ready to use whoever the best, strongest guy is. And right now, that's Alix Fils-Aimé. It's also very interesting, and people can read this in the editorial by Bethany Dupont, our director, who we were just saluting as he went out from the office. Was he quoted Henry T. Worcester, who is the new U.S. ambassador, chargé d'affaires, because he doesn't have any elected president to present his letters of crédence, as they say in Creole. So he's the chargé d'affaires, but in essence, the ambassador. But he has just been talking so tough to these CPT guys, saying, listen, we're ready to drag any of you into to arrest you, throw you in jail. Or there was one quote, which in fact our colleague down at Center for Economic and Policy Research, Jake Johnson, caught, was a tweet where they said they might have to pay the final price. In fact, it was as if they were threatening to kill these guys if they made any dealings or talks or dialogue or anything with the armed groups, which would, of course, be sort of a natural thing when suddenly the power that puts you in place as a puppet is starting to, cast you off. So now you're going to turn to the only other people who are organized on some level with weapons to fight, and those are the armed groups.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of the angle of the judiciary thing that is fascinating to me is that I think a thing that should be borne in mind is that while this date that's coming up this coming Saturday is supposed to be and I think now they're really kind of they're kind of pulling the wool over the eyes more so with that this is the end of the CPT. Okay, fair. But I think that there was this very naive kind of utopian vision that there was going to be some kind of election. Like that was some idea floated out there by the powers that be to really paint the facade of a even a functioning, bourgeois democracy.
You're talking about the election in August?
Well, now that has been pushed even further back, because I think we have this timeline now, which is February, August. But at first, it was that there would be something like a referendum or something,
Mm-hmm.
something to demonstrate that there's democracy, because they're really trying to show that this is that Vivre Ensemble is not democracy. That's a line that a lot of the petit bourgeois take, and kind of people who are even like apologists for the U.S. and Haiti will go out and be talking about how like it's actually the other way around. Vivre Ensemble is the minority. They're the criminals and the terrorists and stuff, and the masses are they're defenseless victims.
Right.
But in reality, the bourgeoisie is very, very, very much been marginalized, even to the point of being completely pliant, completely not even putting up any nationalism, not even being a national bourgeoisie in any respect. And the majority, the masses, are on the side of Vivre Ensemble, which is being portrayed like as some
Yeah.
that the
Well, I
masses
would
could
not.
support some kind of armed group, but that they are intrinsically want to look to the enlightened bourgeoisie, the respectable roads of democracy. The judiciary is one of those. I agree that it's not going to come out that way, but it's fascinating to see how gradually over time the form of the neo-colonial structure becomes more and more just overtly unelected. Where now you've gone from having maybe political parties which are somewhat democratic. I mean, not really the ones that are legal. And of course, Vivre Ensemble can't be a party as such, but then you have, now this structure, CPT, which is totally unelected, was handpicked by Anthony Blinken. And now the idea is either have a strongman, single, basically a dictator who serves the U.S., or judges who are like completely unaccountable to the people, totally foreign, totally alienated from the masses. So it's gradually, the facade is slipping really over time.
Well, I just would say that I don't think we can say the masses are totally with the Vivre Ensemble. There are some masses with the Vivre Ensemble, but the power of the propaganda and to some extent the messiness of the Vivre Ensemble's history, where there were a number of criminal groups in the Vivre Ensemble who they are in the course of either trying to rehabilitate and reform or remove, as recently happened last month or 2 months ago a few weeks ago, when they attacked the Vivre Ensemble affiliate in the area of Bel Air, and basically decapitated it and replaced it with new people because they were continuing criminal behavior, kidnapping, and they freed the kidnapped victims. You can read about it in Haiti Liberté. So that happened about a month and a half ago. And so the masses remain, I could say, torn and unclear where to go. They don't like the government, that they haven't embraced the Vivre Ensemble yet, even though some have, and you can see this online and on radio or online discussions, etc. However, the actions of Fils-Aimé and Eric Prince are certainly pushing people into the arms, and people are beginning to see, wow, we better go with our people rather than these, because these guys just come in and massacre us, cut us down. And it is horrific to see, as people will see in this past week's, the January 28th edition of Haiti Liberté. We did a report on the killing in Bel Air from December 30th to January 28th of 28, or was it 30 people gunned down in their homes, in their courtyards, on the street. A young kid, the first one killed on December 30th. He was looking over a wall at the armored car coming in, and they shot him dead. Motorcycle taxi, a guy coming back from the hospital or from a pharmacy with his pills, a 72-year-old man with his 38-year-old son. And they were both killed right in the street by Perpetual Church. I mean, this is a real slaughter and a terror campaign. Talk about terrorists. These are the terrorists. And this is pushing the population to see what kind of monsters are coming in. They don't see these people as saviors. They are just indiscriminately gunning down people. And then on this January 30th, they killed another 30 people or so in Bel Air, just attacking a building, gunning the people down as they came out. We have many of the pictures. We hopefully will have a report in it in the February 5th issue of Haiti Liberté, which, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. So in any case, the Vivre Ensemble, which has been calling for dialogue, calling for peace, calling for a ceasefire, calling to sit at a table and discuss what is needed rather than just be cast as criminals or terrorists, as Marco Rubio has done. Marco Rubio, imagine, the biggest terrorist on the planet. They're calling everybody else a terrorist. So this is where we are in Haiti, where the people are trying to find where to turn.
Yeah, I think that this is also happening in the context of this movement. I guess you could call it a movement in the U.S. I don't know how strong it is or how organized it is really, but the reaction of people kind of looking at the domestic angle of repression, which isn't the same exactly as that's taking place in Haiti. Right, Haiti is having a revolution is in process, and so they're deploying these counterinsurgency options, and they're gradually failing, all of them. Right, the CPT now, as of next week, will basically have been shown to be a failure for everybody to see, whatever outcome happens. Eric Prince and them are just killing indiscriminately, and that isn't going to be like if the Vietnam or Iraq kind of analogy is there, that doesn't really win anybody over to your side, just killing children and dogs and old people. Right? It's not so. This is happening at the same time that there's this movement in the U.S. that we're gradually seeing people, particularly focusing on ICE and the immigration custom enforcement. They're kind of they're policing force that's also become something of a paramilitary is not the right word, but there's certainly some kind of direct kind of rank and file that the current administration uses for certain ends, right? To terrorize people, to intimidate people, which has always been ICE under any administration. But I think Trump particularly looks to immigration as a way to inspire fear and tell people, like in Minnesota, tell the Somalis there, we're going to come for you, particularly, and all this stuff. And that's certainly affecting Haitians in the diaspora here in New York. I think that the timing of the two things, Trump is not the cause of it, but he kind of exacerbates the effect that people are kind of terrified and maybe you would think are demobilized, but then there is more of a movement among the youth for sure, kind of looking at ICE and latching on to ICE, right? In maybe a similar way to like 5, 6, almost 6 years ago, there was a movement looking at policing in general. And now it's kind of ICE, but again, I think
The defund the police movement.
yeah, that's kind of ICE is a little different than police. It's a form of policing, obviously, but it is Trump, looking to repress immigrants and have this kind of imperialist, um, very interventionist policy. And ICE is kind of the domestic arm of that international policy, which I think having, like a guy like Rubio as Secretary of State epitomizes that. And then all the other stuff for Trump is very much, his kind of own, the kind of the nativist aspects that come into play. All that is to say that the struggles are intertwined, but I think that we haven't yet seen people make some connections to ICE here doing stuff and what's happening in Haiti.
Yes, I think it is. Yes, I mean, I think it is apparent, and all empires have that. That is, as they begin to falter, as they begin to crumble, and they use repression abroad, that repression eventually finds its way back into the metropole, into the core of the empire. We saw that in Rome. We are seeing that now today in the US, where the same groups of really almost paramilitary groups, like ICE is practically a paramilitary group, that just goes in and they're not acting like police or reading people their rights or anything like that. It's just, dragging you out in your underwear in the sub-zero temperatures or shooting you, as they did to Renee Good and Alix Petty. So this is a thing which is pushing people, even on the right, even people who had been supporting Trump and the MAGA agenda, of alienating them. And they're saying, wow, this is not right. You take Petty, and he was a ICU nurse for veterans, and a lot of veterans who are in many cases irreproachable for their patriotic stance are denouncing what has been done. Yeah. And we've even seen that ISIS had to retreat, in essence, from Minneapolis.
Yeah, and people are having a little bit closer of an examination of all the ways that we have policing, we being really the United States, but that, the border is very beneficial to the U.S. as an empire, to those who are willing to go along with that through nationalism, who want to, who see that there is like this ladder, and you just want to make sure you're in the top rungs of the ladder, and anybody who's lower on the rungs can get kicked down. I think that it will have a very, repressive effect on diasporas. Certainly, the Haitian diaspora is very much victimized by this. So it is difficult, to try to get the youth and those who are living here in the metropole kind of connected, supporting the struggle while all this is happening. That you have this direct arm of the government that is kind of more emboldened, and that you have people like signing up to join ICE because they want to be part of this institution that's going to be doing some of the some of the more brutal stuff that they see as like the mission for the U.S. right now, short of joining the army or being a mercenary or whatnot. And I think that slowly people will make some connections. There is a movement, and since 2020, people have been doing like abolitionism as a concept that has typically applied to policing in general, but it hasn't really looked at how the border is very much like, and that I think that Trump coming in it has kind of helped make that clear because there's such overt nativism. uh, it doesn't mean that under like Obama or Biden ICE was any different, or there weren't mass deportations or anything like that. So people are becoming a little bit more, I think, willing to look at ICE in maybe the same way that hopefully the next step for a lot of them would be to look at it like how you can look at the police as like, or the prison industrial complex as major employers in a lot of places, major recruiters for people who have a high school diploma, and can then be kind of siphoned off to work this job. ICE is kind of like that, in the same way that the army is like that. And if Rubio's wishes are granted, then that would be the dude who's joining ICE or the police would be then the one going to Haiti as well. So there's some person there who's kind of who people know that type of person, or they're trying to stop that type of person. People are going after like recruiting fairs for ICE. So I think that movement is pretty. It's not maybe directly related to the February 7th stuff, other than it's happening right now, as is the February 7th date.
Well, if I can sort of link the two, I came of age at a time when, during the Vietnam War, there was a lot of debate on the left as to how is revolution going to happen in America. And I became part of a current, which ironically, Joseph Mullen here, all of 24 years old, became aware of studying history books, called the Liberation Support Movement. And the essence of their analysis was that, in line with what Marx and Engels had said, that the English proletariat will never be able to liberate itself as long as the Irish proletariat is also exploited and oppressed. We observed the young people protesting the imperialist war in Vietnam being beaten over the head by hard hats down on Wall Street who didn't agree with that and were part of what was then called the silent majority. This was the core of America, the privileged American worker, the labor aristocracy, it's sometimes called, which had television sets in their bedrooms and 2 cars in the garage, and took vacations and lived what was called a middle class life, because they didn't define it by relationship to the means of production, but by income. And at that point in time, auto workers were making maybe 25, 30 bucks an hour. It was a pretty good wage. So it was a period where there was so much super profit. There were so many super profits flowing into the metropole, into the US, from its neo-colonies, that they were able to buy off their working class and give them Medicare and Social Security and so on and so forth, which did not exist in the neo-colonies in the Third World. And so the vision of LSM was that the national liberation struggles would in fact be the leading edge of revolution in the world. And this would cut off the tentacles of the empire to be able to suck out those super profits, and thereby the empire would die. as things began to crumble in it. And I think that is the moment now, 50 years later, 60 years later, that we are watching and seeing. And so when those tentacles are cut, as they have been cut with the growing multipolar world, with former neo-colonies turning to China, turning to Russia, turning to the BRICS, turning to the New World, which now has outstripped the G8 in terms of GDP, in terms of their wealth, and certainly the number of people that they command. So, and right now we see the alliance between the U.S. and the Western European imperialisms dissolving as they begin fighting among themselves, and with Canada as well thrown in. So the original core of the imperialism in the North Atlantic countries is dissolving. And it's for sure that this means increasing difficulty and harsher conditions as we see the entire social safety net being shredded by Trump. And in many ways, we think this was his precise purpose, that this was not a complete accident or malfunction or something that this was in a way programmed. And this is why we will see in this period, as Joseph is explaining, there will be a reaction by some trying to hold on to the past, hold on to that privilege that we had, and thinking we deserve that privilege. We're Americans. We have that right, that birthright to the American dream, etc. But the struggles in Haiti are precisely directly linked to these struggles we see in Minneapolis, that we see in Springfield, Ohio, that we see in New York City, and across the U.S. And I think, we're in for tumultuous times. 2026 has already started with a bang, as it were, with the kidnapping of President Maduro. In the U.S., they're not ready. Trump is not ready to take on Russia and China. He's doing everything to sort of soften things, and they're spanking him also, as we saw China do with the whole tariff fight he had with them, where they said, oh, okay, you're going to give us that, no rare earths for you. And immediately the guy buckled like a cheap suit. So in speaking of Trump, so he's instead the bully, picking on those low-hanging fruit, those smaller countries that he can pick on, like Venezuela, like Haiti, Colombia, Cuba, Canada, Denmark. So we're seeing a bully who is frantic, panicked, trying to escape. And I think that Haiti, in many ways, stands a good chance of resistance. These people have been, they have nothing to lose. They have no privileges to lose. They have a world to gain. And that is, as Mark said, they have nothing to lose but their chains. And that's a very dangerous fighting force, especially against mercenaries who, that's all they have to lose is the money they're getting back. They're not going to lay down their life. If the battle really starts, the mercenaries will turn and run. Machiavelli told us that back in the 16th century. So
I think, I think we will be back next Sunday to see the day after the supposed
that will be the
abdication
8th.
of power.
Yeah.
If somebody will be thrown out by the wheel of misfortune of politicking. And I think, I don't know that we should pay so much attention to these different actors. It's important to show them kind of for who they are. It's especially important to criticize reformism and opportunism by the left, the comprador left,
NGO left.
The NGO left. Yeah, I mean, that's important to focus on. But I think that the overall situation, as we described it, that there's a revolutionary movement in course that doesn't change after the 7th or because of the 7th. That there's no, they will try to set up these deadlines and dates and stuff to give the illusion of democracy or some plan that they have, but there's no plan. They don't know really how to get out of the crisis. So yeah, I think this is kind of a preview of what is happening contextually, both here and in Haiti, in the diaspora and on the ground in Haiti. And
well, I think this broadcast, we're still small, just getting going in a sense, but we can provide a kind of week by week analysis of the struggle in the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere and in the richest nation in the Western Hemisphere. And coming from these two poles, we can really get a sense of the decline of the struggle that's undertaken in the course of seeing this empire collapse. And, sometimes people use the word fascism a little lightly. If there's a repression, police here, it's fascist. Fascism is really where you see the pressure become so great on a nation that the bourgeoisie, the ruling class of that nation, begins to become inserted and married very closely with the government. It's no longer farmed out. And we see that this past week with the Pentagon becoming shareholders in a company called L3 Harris, which makes rocket propulsion jets for missiles. I got this from Richard Wolff, the esteemed Richard Wolff. He was pointing this out. But this is the textbook definition of fascism, where you have the state and the bourgeoisie merge and form into a unit, because now essentially the Pentagon has its own company, and who do you think it's going to give its bids to? It's not going to give it freely to anybody. They're going to give it to the one they have shares in and who they get dividends from. So this is really, we can say, the early stages of this seriously textbook fascist situation. And it's only in a country which is under extreme duress from it's impossible to ever pay off $40 trillion debt, which it owes to all these countries who are now becoming its enemies in Europe, not to mention, of course, Japan or China or wherever else. We are beginning to see the death throes of this empire. And here at Haiti Liberté, we'll do our best to give you a view from the poorest country to the richest.
Yeah, so with that date in mind, next week reporting will be very interesting, and then come Sunday we will have kind of the first post CPT day.
The first
of history.
The new transition.
And we'll still be sitting here. I mean, probably.
Well, we hope.
Yeah.
Unless ICE comes in and raids us.
I mean, unfortunately, it's tricky to say, because it's almost like a lot will have actually changed in the plane of struggle, but the conditions of the struggle kind of continue. The support to the movement continues, but it's kind of I think Kervin's Louisant, one of our writers, put it very well. Kind of the fiction can't continue after a certain time. So it's all about they picked the date. I don't know how they came up with Feb 7,
right?
But that's the day after.
And we have to see, these are long processes. The Chinese Revolution that we want to begin at 1927, it took another 22 years for it to come to fruition. But as this guy, the first proletarian leader of history, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, started in 1791, didn't end until 1804, and he was killed a couple of years later. But it's a long process. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. It's going to be a real fight.
Okay, well, thank you for tuning in, and see you next week. Bye.
Bye. So that recording.